the great Kurt Russell and I did this show called The Quest, and a Western in 1976. One director came in and he started doing that finesse thing with me. I had one little scene with Kurt and I, and we were talking to somebody, and it wasn't a big, important, emotional scene. And he said, "Try this, Tim, try that." And, I was in acting class, so I was like, okay. And, and he's tweaking, and we did way too many takes of something that really was not that important. And then we got to Kurt's coverage, and he started trying to do this to Kurt. Kurt said, after about 2 takes, he said, "You know what? This is as good as I can do it. So let's just move on."
Hi, I'm Rob Word, and I have a special treat today because we're going to talk about Clint Eastwood with somebody who worked with Clint, observed him, and actually learned a few things besides. And now he's a brilliant director, an actor you all know. I've watched him as I grew up. I was watching him grow up at the same time. It's Tim Matheson. Tim.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, how are you?
Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Oh, glad you're here. And your book, too, Damn Glad to Meet You, is fabulous. So
good.
I want to mention that one more time. I think it's probably in its 3rd or 4th printing by now.
Let's hope so. It has a lot of stories of the adventures I was on and as I was growing up, and in each different decade that I was acting in, and directing in. So there's a lot of ground to cover.
Well, let's cover the Clint Eastwood decade right now, okay?
Sure.
The cop decade, Magnum Force.
Yes.
And Ted Post, who had directed Clint several times,
right?
In Rawhide first.
Okay.
That's where they met.
That's where they met.
And then he did Hang 'em High, and then he did Magnum Force with Clint. Actually, he was more of a person who was there as Clint was sort of directing. Isn't that true?
I think that's accurate. You never knew. Ted was the director, but it was Clint's crew. It was Clint. When Clint walked on the set, it's about Clint, Mm-hmm. It's like he doesn't, he's not pushy. He's not, he just is so bigger than life, larger than life. Mm-hmm. And but the nicest guy, and he's so good to his crew, and he empowers everyone on the set. It was such a great lesson to learn. I asked him. I think I told you this, but I asked him if he wanted to run lines or rehearse or anything. He said, "No, I like saying the lines on camera for the first time," and I thought, well, I'm a studied actor. I like to rehearse, and good actors rehearse. But when we started shooting, it was like what Henry Fonda said about acting. I walk in the room, I hit my mark, I look them in the eye, and I tell them the truth. Mm-hmm. And that's what Clint does.
He's a great reactor.
Oh my God!
Like Duke was.
Yes.
Duke was the same. People talk about what a good reactor he was, just like Spencer Tracy.
Yes.
It's all about listening.
Yes.
It's like, for these, I don't like to rehearse doing this interview.
Nope.
I do my homework so that I can hopefully answer some questions if it comes up, and I can lead us where we need to go. But I like the spontaneity of it.
Totally.
And it makes it more fun for me, which then I hope it makes it more fun for you out there too.
Well, and Johnny Carson always did that. He didn't want to run into the guest backstage, mm-hmm. because they'll tell him the story that they want to tell out mm-hmm. there, and then the second time you tell it, it's not as good.
No.
And John Ford, I think, Clint comes from that school, didn't like to rehearse, especially if it was an emotional scene. I think I remember with young Abe Lincoln, young Mr. Lincoln with Henry Fonda, there was a scene between he and his mother, and it was a very emotional scene, and he just said, no, don't say the words, just, you'll be there, Henry, you'll sit there, come in and sit and talk, and okay, good, cameras, okay, good, all right, action. And so that the time that they said the words for the first time was so emotional for both of them. And he got it on film, and he realized, and Clint just wanted things to be raw and real, because, it's like, otherwise it gets too studied, it gets too acty, and the more you say, tweak this line and tweak that line, then you start acting it, you know, and it gets stiff. And I think it's a real, it's a truthful thing. I mean, the first time when I worked with Mel Brooks and Bancroft and To Be or Not to Be, Mel, it was the first time they had video playback on a set that I'd worked on.
And Mel was not the director.
No, he wasn't the director, but he was. Like Clint wasn't the director, but he was. And so Mel would always, you know, and so we did a scene. We did the first take and then the second take, and then we looked at it. It was really good. And then Mel started tweaking it, and so he went 10 takes, 12 takes, 14 takes, and then he looks at the 14th take and he goes, "Okay, now just forget everything I said. Let's do it again." And we say the 15th take, and we just winged it again. And he said, "Okay, print 1, 2, and 15," because all that stuff in between was just too precious. It got too studied, you know. And Clint was one who, you know, he finished early every day. You know, we'd pull up a scene from next week's work because you're ahead of schedule. And the crews loved him, and because when they'd say, I know Saul Rubinek, if you know, was on The Unforgiven. He tells the story that the dolly grip asked Clint, "How fast should I make the push in on the camera?" And he goes, "Now you figure it out. You know, as fast as you think you should." And because he wanted that person to be as involved in the creative thing, because if I tell you to do it, then you're just gonna shove it, you know. But if you're into the scene, now you're gonna get it there right at the right moment, you know. And that's Clint, you know. And I think Saul the first day told Clint he wanted to change this action in the scene, and Clint looked at me and he said, "You know, you don't have to explain that to me. You are the head of your character's department, and you can do whatever you want."
That's a good line.
You know, and except don't change the dialogue, or if you're going to do that, ask me. But listen, you know, you do what you want to do. That's why I hired you. And it's a great lesson, I think, for all of us that, you know, because a lot of directors just manicure every little thing, and they want to control you, and it gets stiff.
Well, William Wyler is known for so many different takes without telling the performers what it is he's looking for. 20, 30, 40 takes. And
it's like Kubrick.
Well, that too, but look at their work.
Yeah.
So they're seeing it, and Wyler just didn't know how to explain it verbally to the people, and so he would drive them crazy. It would drive you crazy.
Yeah, you know, and it's like the great Kurt Russell and I did this show called The Quest, and a Western in 1976. One director came in, and he started doing that finesse thing with me. I had one little scene with Kurt and I, and we were talking to somebody, and it wasn't a big, important, emotional scene. And he said, "Try this, Tim. Try that." And, you know, I was in acting class, so I was, okay. And, you know, and he's tweaking, and we did way too many takes of something that really was not that important. And then we get to Kurt's coverage, and he started trying to do this to Kurt. Kurt said, after about 2 takes, he said, "You know what? This is as good as I can do it. So let's just move on." And because it wasn't important, and whatever he was doing wasn't, that little director wasn't that important, and Kurt was, you know, he was the most honest.
Well, he was a pro, like you had been. He'd been a child star, but he had starred in his own live action series, not just a cartoon character. Yeah. and so, did you learn a lot from Kirk?
Oh yes, Kurt was he was great. I mean, he taught me that it was a team sport. I mean,
he has a sports background, and his dad too, with a league, baseball league.
Bing was a semi-pro baseball player and a good actor, and Kurt was a semi-pro baseball player, got injured, and went back to acting after being a child star. And he said something to me about when he said, when I look at a script, when I looked at, you know, any of the movies I did and stuff, I always found there was only about 3 or 4 scenes in each script that I could really sink my teeth into. They really wanted like a total emotional commitment. But the rest of the scenes were really just sort of pretty much just deliver the mail, you know, and be, you know, be real, and just, but don't do too much. And it was, nobody ever said that in an acting class, you know, that and what happens is you get a lot of people trying to do something in every scene, and it gets to be overacting. You know.
Well, when you get a script, do you break it down and say, these are the key scenes where I need to really focus, and this one I can just sort of slough through?
Well, it's not slough through, but it's like it's not a critical scene. It's not a plot point. It's this. What's the point of? As a director, you say, what's the purpose of this scene? The purpose of this scene is for you to get his phone number. You know, and you con him into, let me borrow your phone, and so you can get his phone number, so you're going to help implicate him later. That's all that happens in that scene. You know, it's not a great acting scene, but it's simple. I'm not, as a director, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You know, but the scene where you're given the information that your loved one has left you, that's a scene that something is of major importance happens to your character. And how do you deal with that? You know, I mean, that's significant. That you can dig your teeth into. So I know what Kurt meant, and it was a great lesson. They don't teach that in acting class. You know, everything in acting class. Oh, every scene, every moment is real. And you know what? I understand what they're saying, but. Just keep it simple, Soup. And,
Well, and the realness comes across.
Yeah.
With Kirk, because he had been top billed over Charles Bronson in the Travels of Jamie McPheeters.
Right, that's right.
Bronson came in after the first season and was going to be billed above Kurt. And Kurt's dad, Bing, said, look at the contract, boys. My son is the star. And
he's
so
Jamie
Charles Bronson got below,
Yeah.
if you look at those too. But that's the first time I really started watching Bronson too. I loved his work and his stoicism.
Yeah.
And he would walk into a scene and you just know he could take care of business. But he was funny too.
Really?
He was, if you look at some of those things, he had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
We gave him a golden boot too. Years ago. We gave most people. We gave Kurt a golden. Actually, we didn't, because Kurt said we would do the Golden Boot Awards for the fundraiser for the Motion Picture Hospital every August, and he says, "I'm up here with Goldie for the summer, so we're not coming back to L.A. until September." He was at the Westerner Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. Where he was honored, but also his father got an award. And he says, that's why I'm here. He said, I wanted my dad to be still around to know about this, but he wasn't.
This is really a pleasure. There's an energy in this room that you really don't feel anywhere else. So it's nice to be a part of that. And it's especially nice to be invited under these circumstances. And I want to thank Wyatt and Mike. Thank you. They called me up and started asking me about coming here. And as I was about to come up with some excuse, like I usually do, to say, gee, I don't think he said, we're going to induct you again. And I said, I'll be there. It is great to do something like this. I was very fortunate to have what I consider the greatest mom and dad you could possibly have. And I was excited, too, about doing it and coming here and speaking on behalf of my father, because my mom was alive still at the time. And I thought she'd get a kick out of it. I was going to surprise her, fly her here. She didn't know really what it was going to be. And she'd see this, and I think she would have liked that a lot. She would have liked you people. So I have to say that my dad, ever since he was a little boy, he really did say he just wanted to do two things in his life. He wanted to play baseball and he wanted to play Cowboys and Indians. And that's exactly what he did. He also said that he wanted to be the first person to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame and win an Academy Award. Well, in those days, the Academy Award was basically the Hall of Fame of entertainment. That's what he wanted. He played baseball. He owned a baseball club. Because of what he did with that ball club, it became the most successful minor league club in the history of the game. He went into the Hall of Fame in the late 70s, so he's in Cooperstown. He died in 2003, but his journey wasn't complete. My mom also died a couple years ago. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we couldn't do this in 20 when it was going to happen really in 21. At least we're getting to do it now. But the house was being sold, and it was kind of weird. You know, you're watching the house you grew up in go away. Went over there, and there were a couple items left, and one of them was his hat from Bonanza. I recognized that. And so, Dad, here you are, coming into this cowboy hall, this entertainment. And so, very simply, I'm going to leave something for the museum. This was the hat of Deputy Sheriff Clem Foster, played by Bing Russell for, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 years on Bonanza. All I ever knew is that when my dad came home and he said, we got another Bonanza, I'm going to do another Bonanza episode, we all went out and celebrated. And so, thanks again on behalf of my father, Bing Russell, and on behalf of myself. You guys are great. And if there's ever a moment in your lives, which I just feel some of the time and the energy in this room, where you think your values and your ways are not being listened to or are in some way forgotten, I promise you that's not true. Thank you very much. Thanks, Michael.
Bing was a wonderful guy and a great father and a wonderful actor.
Mm-hmm. He worked a lot.
Oh my God, yeah.
One quick question before you go. The haircut in Animal House. Tell me the story about that, because it was set in 1962, I think.
Yes.
And the hairstyles were totally different from what we had today. Were people saying, I don't want to cut my hair?
Oh yeah. Well, Belushi didn't want to cut his hair because he said, "I got to have it for Saturday Night Live." You know, I mean, everybody knows me with this kind of hair, and I got to have it for Saturday Night Live. And we all went into the one local barbershop in Eugene, and because we had a hairdresser who cut one of the actors' hair and just butchered him. So Landis said, "No. We're all going to the barbershop." And we'd vote, all together, we'd vote on what kind of haircut we were going to each get, you know. And I think I had the sort of the JFK kind of, you know, trimmed, you know, or had Cary Grant or whatever it was. But we'd vote on it, and we'd vote whether D-Day keeps his handlebar mustache. So, but Belushi was across the street at a bar, and he was just hanging out, waiting, because he's not going to get a haircut. And then, so D-Day, Bruce McGill, with his handlebar mustache, says Landis wanted him to get a buzz cut like Lee Marvin had in like The Dirty Dozen, I think, just shaved. And he said, before we do that, let me try something, because I have a look I think might work, but if it doesn't work, you don't like it, then we'll shave it. He said, okay, and so Bruce says, I want a flat top with ducktails. And he says this to the barber, and the barber said, it's called a Chicago boxcar. I used to do 6 of these a day when I was in Chicago, the South Side. And he goes, yes, okay, right. So he does that, he cuts his hair like that, and Landis loves it. And he grabs the cape, and he says, come on with me. And we run across to the bar with Belushi, and he holds up the cape in front of Bruce. And he says, hey, Belushi, you're going to be so jealous, you're not going to get your hair cut. Wait till you see what Bruce did. And he says, well, show him. He drops it, and Bruce, and he goes, oh my God, Chicago boxcar, because John's from Chicago. He said, all right, I'll get my hair cut. So we go back over, and we sort of orchestrated John's haircut. But, I mean, and that brought us as Deltas together, you know, and Landis got us there a week early so we would all get to know each other and have that time
But
together.
the fraternities, you guys weren't allowed to mingle with the other fraternities off camera either, were you?
We chose not to mingle with them.
Well, who would want to do that?
We were so in character for the week we got there ahead of everybody. And we had a week sort of rehearsal before we started shooting.
A week of partying, I hear.
A little bit. And so we all bonded. And then I think that Saturday, the before we started shooting, the rest of the guys show up, and I think Mark Metcalf shows up from New York, and the guys knew each other. He knew a lot of the New York actors, and he comes in and he goes. He's thinking, "Wow, I'm going to see my buddies. Hey guys!" And we go, "Boo!" and just started throwing food at him, you know. And it was like, "Oh, geez." No, we didn't. We just sort of said, "No, you can't play with us."
I think that is one of the funniest movies ever made, and it still holds up because it was set in a specific time period to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's there. It's one of the reasons I think Westerns hold up so well today, unlike the Mod Squad or something where you've got the white plastic boots and stuff. But Westerns, it's the outfits. They don't look that dated. Sure, there's some of the hairstyles from the period of whenever they shot the film, but the Westerns themselves, because they're set in the past, appeal to an audience.
So surprising, no one ever said anything about, don't you guys ever change your clothes? and the thing is, you know, you shoot your stock footage. That was how you could do the Virginian and Bonanza. You'd go up the first episode up to a ranch, a cattle ranch, and you'd ride left to right with the cattle, and then ride right to left with the cattle. Now right to left with your horse alone, and now race left to right. And so you'd get all these shots that they could cut into an episode and wouldn't have to recreate it back on the lot. And it was the only way you could get the Virginian shot in eight days, you know, was all that stock footage. And that's why we never changed our clothes.
Well, and I bet they did smell. But you had multiple outfits.
Of course you
just
did, yes.
all looked the same. The Lone Ranger, when Clayton Moore got fired because he asked for a raise, and they replaced him with John Hart.
Oh, God.
You still see those right to left, left to right footage of
Clayton
Clayton Moore while it's John Hart.
I didn't realize he'd gotten fired.
Oh, yes. You got to watch some of our shows because we have a little bit of film history on Westerns. Goodness.
How long did he last?
About a season and a half.
Yeah.
Because Jack Rather said, who's going to notice? The guy's got a mask on. I'm not going to give him a raise. Nobody's going to notice. Well, all the kids wrote in, where's the real Lone Ranger?
Oh, my God.
For real. And so they brought him back and gave him his raise.
They did?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
I'm glad it had a happy ending.
Yeah. That's a good cowboy story.
Yes, all right.
So anyway, Tim, thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
I love
so much.
hearing these stories.
It's great talking to you.
Write another book.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you down the trail.